Okay, let's talk about 2026, because a perfect storm of geopolitics, domestic law, and industrial reality is brewing, and it's set to force the United States into a really radical new posture: energy isolationism. We're talking about a huge pivot away from global markets, all driven by a crisis that's going to leave the administration with very few very extreme options. So let's break down exactly how this crisis could unfold.
This really gets right to the heart of it. We're going to see a policy move that, on the surface, looks like just a simple shipping waiver. But it's not. It is the first domino to fall. It's the tell, the signal that a much bigger, much more market-shattering decision to ban energy exports is on its way.
All right, so here's our roadmap. We're going to walk through the entire chain of events. We'll start with the crisis that kicks this all off, then look at the physical and legal walls that force the government's hand. We'll cover the brutal impact on U.S. producers, the international fallout, and then wrap it up with the big takeaway for investors.
So, first up, how does this all begin? Well, it starts with a massive geopolitical shock that sends shockwaves across the globe and forces an immediate, almost panicked response from Washington. This right here, this is the number that changes everything. In our 2026 scenario, a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz happens. And just like that, 20 million barrels of oil per day are taken off the global market. I mean, that is a catastrophic supply shock. It's the kind of thing that sends prices into the stratosphere.
With global oil just screaming past $100 a barrel, the administration's first move is to smash that emergency glass on domestic shipping. They issue a waiver for the Jones Act, that 100-year-old law that dictates who can ship goods between U.S. ports. This is a big deal, something usually only done for things like hurricanes, and it tells you just how bad the crisis is. Now look at this, because the economics here are just wild. It costs nearly 10 times more to ship oil from Texas to Florida on a protected U.S. ship than it does to send it all the way to Colombia. It's absurd. The waiver helps with that crazy cost, but it doesn't solve the real problem. See, as long as producers can get a higher price in Europe or Asia, that's where the oil's going to go. The only way to stop that and crash domestic prices is to physically trap the oil here with an export ban.
Okay, but trapping all that oil here in the U.S. runs headfirst into a massive physical problem. We call it the technical wall. And what it means is that America's refineries, well, they just aren't built to run on American oil.
And this is the core of that mismatch. For decades, U.S. refiners spent billions to process heavy, sour crude from places like Canada and Mexico. But then the shale boom happened, and suddenly we're flooded with light, sweet crude. These are just chemically different products, and you can't just swap one for the other in these incredibly complex refineries. It doesn't work that way.
And just so we're all on the same page here, API gravity is the key term. Just think of it like this. A high number means light and thin, that's our U.S. shale oil. A low number means heavy and thick, like the stuff our refineries were built for.
And this chart really just lays it bare. Look at that. A whopping 70% of our refining capacity is geared towards the heavy stuff we import. So if you ban exports, you create this huge glut of light crude that our own system physically cannot absorb. And fixing it? Not a chance. I mean, we're talking about up to $1 billion and years of work just to retool a single major refinery. So in a crisis, there is absolutely no quick technical fix to this problem.
So you've got this technical wall. But on top of that, the administration is trapped by a legal wall. And that's thanks to a landmark Supreme Court decision that basically forces them into an all-or-nothing choice. The case is Learning Resources Inc. v. Trump. And in February of 2026, the court rules that the president's emergency economic powers do not include the power to just slap on tariffs. And believe me, this changes the entire game.
Let's break down that 6-3 decision. Chief Justice Roberts, writing for the majority, basically says the power to tax belongs to Congress, period. Justice Gorsuch agrees, adding that for these huge economic issues, the president needs explicit permission. The dissenters argue that tariffs have always been a tool to regulate trade, but they lost. So what's the bottom line? This ruling creates what people are calling a donut hole in the president's power. He can take the extreme step and completely prohibit a trade, an embargo. But he can't use the more flexible tool of just taxing it. So when this crisis hits, he's backed into a corner. His only move is the nuclear option, a full export ban. Now, let's follow the consequences of that choice. Because trapping all U.S. oil production inside our own borders would kick off an immediate and really severe downturn for the producers, the guys who actually get the oil out of the ground. This chart tells the entire story right here. It costs about $70 a barrel to drill a new shale well.
But an export ban would create such a glut of oil at home that the price would crash to $50, maybe even lower. The math just completely falls apart. Suddenly, there's zero incentive to drill new wells. It vanishes overnight.
And you can bet the big producers, the big six that now control half the Permian Basin, they are not going to drill at a loss just to help the government keep prices down. Nope. Their response will be swift, and it'll be predictable. Extreme capital discipline.
Their playbook is crystal clear. They'll stop all new drilling. They'll pour all their cash into dividends and stock buybacks to keep investors happy. They will absolutely refuse to subsidize a government-made price crash, and they'll simply let U.S. production fall off a cliff.
Now, this America First policy has massive consequences beyond our borders. By trying to solve a domestic price problem, the U.S. would end up creating enormous instability for our closest allies and partners around the world.
And the fallout would be brutal. Our European allies, who now depend on U.S. natural gas, would be left out in the cold. It would probably spark a huge trade war with Canada, the very country that supplies more than half of the heavy crude our refineries need to even operate. So, in effect, it's a kind of supply suicide. We'd be cutting ourselves off from the critical imports we need just to make our own system work.
So, let's tie all this together. What's the key takeaway from this whole chain of events for anyone who's watching the markets?
This is it. This is the causal chain of energy isolationism. It starts with a geopolitical shock that forces an all-or-nothing policy. That policy creates a domestic glut and a price crash. The price crash leads to a production shutdown, and that shutdown ultimately results in a long-term, structural decline of the entire U.S. energy industry. It's a short-term tactical win on inflation at the cost of long-term strategic decay.
And all of this leaves us with one final and I think crucial question. A scenario like this would cause a massive split between U.S. and global oil prices. So the question is, are you positioned for that? Are you ready for the price of American oil to crash while the global benchmark soars? That right there, that is the billion-dollar question for 2026.